We've looked at how each paragraph of the assignment is built up with analysis, evaluation and evidence. We're now going to look at language for expressing your position in your writing. Your voice is the language you use for expressing your position. There are a few ways you can do this. Firstly, you can do this through citation. Citation just means referencing within the text, and I'll show you examples of this on the next slides. Good attention to referencing shows respect for the reader, because then they can double-check your interpretations against the original text if they need to. Secondly, you can raise your voice through making your own comments in the light of the reading you've done, but you usually do this without the personal pronoun I, and I'll be showing you how to do that too. Thirdly, it's important to use linking words to guide your reader through the text. Always remember to consider your text from the point of view of a reader. Are the signposting words and the logical links within the text clear? In terms of citation, non-integral referencing is very useful when you want to show something you believe to be a fact. The authority inspired by the surnames of the writers and their date of publication of the source is evidence for your belief, so you put this in brackets after the fact. It's called non-integral because the source reference stands alone and is not actually part of the syntax of the sentence. You can see here that as a writer I believe that the Western aid programme has not had much effect, and my evidence that this is true comes from Adjemolu and Robinson. And you can see that I think that the SEZ model has been very successful, and here Willis is the evidence that proves that I'm right. We then move on to integral citations. This of course means that the surnames of the authors and the year of publication of the source form part of the syntax or structure of the sentence itself. On this slide we can immediately see that the paragraph focuses on Western governments and writers who have criticised the SEZ model, so their names come first in the following sentences. By writing Whalley and Weisbrod suggest, I'm implying that I do not really believe their criticism. I don't really believe that the Chinese are only focusing on resource-rich countries. Adjemolu and Robinson's state shows that I report their ideas in a neutral way, but then I show my lack of trust in their ideas by using the verb claim. I'm distancing myself from the view that poverty can only be truly reduced by long-term institutional changes. In this way, my position is gradually emerging. It's clear from the first sentence of paragraph 3 that the focus of this paragraph is on the counter-argument. That is, it's going to focus on emphasising the benefits of the SEZ approach. As a writer, my positive appraisal of my sources can be seen in the choice of reporting verbs. Highlight, point out, show, indicate, all convey here the idea of positivity. And it's obvious too that I approve of Whalley and Weisbrod's reasoning for concluding that the SEZs will have a positive impact in Africa on the basis of the reporting verb argue. I obviously think that Whalley and Weisbrod have given very good reasons for their position. The next couple of slides deal with my own evaluative comments. I can express a bold viewpoint through will inevitably or it's undoubtedly true. I can also express a more cautious viewpoint through verbs such as it seems that or this may allow, or by using the adjective reasonable in it's reasonable to assume that. Notice how I managed to express my own viewpoint even though I don't use the words I think, I believe that, or in my opinion. Now let's turn to the linking words which allow you to show relationships between ideas in your writing and guide your reader through the text. The first one we're going to look at is concession. The words that commonly indicate concession in writing are although, while, whilst and despite. Now while and whilst are very, very similar. It doesn't particularly matter how you spell it, whether it's while or whilst. As I explained in week 2 when I was talking about the critical language used in the Bygate report, concession means that although you agree that one thing is true, you accept that one thing is true, you want to notice that a second thing, which is more important, is true as well. If we look at this example at the bottom of the slide, although the number of people living in poverty has been gradually declining, yes, this is true. The author admits it's the number of people that has been declining, but there's a second thing which is also true to consider. 12.7% of people in the developing world still lived at or below $1.90 per day in 2012. So that's also true, and actually more important to me than the fact that the number of people living in poverty has been declining. So this is something we need to address, the fact that there are still 12.7% of people living in the world on the poverty line. Now we can do this concession by using although, while, whilst and despite, as I've already told you. But you do have to remember that there's a slightly different grammatical construction coming after despite compared to an although, while or whilst. With although, while and whilst, you've got the dependent clause plus the independent clause following those words. With despite, you must follow a noun phrase plus independent clause, and I'm going to show you that on the next slide. So, despite this level of success, and notice after despite you've got a noun phrase, this level of success. Then we have a new sentence, an independent clause. The model has been criticised by Western governments. So we know that the fact that the writer thinks the model has been criticised by Western governments and writers is more important and overrides the fact that it's had some success. If we look at the next one, while it's too early in the process to draw definitive conclusions, yes, that's true. It's also true that it seems that the development of this zone has allowed for greater economic growth. So it's more important to think, yes, it's early, but it seems that there's been a lot of growth. And the third one, yes, it's true. These donations are welcomed. Welcomed means praiseworthy, valuable and important. Although they're valued and important, we must consider that their level of success is now being challenged. So these words are really, really important to allow you to admit that something's true, but then overcome it by saying something else, which I think is more important, is also true. And that allows analysis and evaluation as well. Let's look at cause-effect next. We've got the word effect in there. The Western aid programme began in the 1950s and has had little long-term effect. Why has it had little effect? What's the cause? Largely due to the lack of structural change. So exploring this attention to detail, the writer's been able to use cause-effect relationships to analyse problems with the Western aid programme. Reason-result. Very similar to cause and effect. The authors argue that the impact is likely to rise. That's a result, as the Chinese investment levels have accelerated. That as there means because. The impact is likely to rise because Chinese investment levels have accelerated since the start of the financial crisis. So there we've got an example of analysing and giving reasons and giving results, suggesting other possibilities as an alternative approach. Now that as, and we've already seen as meaning because, here we've got the word as meaning in accordance with or in line with. As an alternative approach, China has adopted a policy of. So a way of suggesting other possibilities and a good way of linking back to the previous sentence. Showing a contrast. Two ways that are shown in these examples. Nevertheless, other writers point out that Chinese competition can lead to newer, stronger local companies. Or, in contrast, the diversion of Western aid has been well documented. So that's showing a contrast to the previous idea. Now the writer could have also said however there, but in fact there weren't any examples that I could use in the text for that. I could only find nevertheless and in contrast. Showing how two things correlate. Now correlate means what's the relationship, what's the link between two things? So as more data becomes available, we've got the word as again here, and it means during the time that. So, during the time that more recent data becomes available, the impact is likely to rise. So these two things will happen together. You'll get more recent data and the impact will probably rise. It's really important to give examples too when you're writing critically, because examples give extra detail about what you're writing about. They give evidence and they give detail. China is now exporting this model to a proposed 19 states across the developing world. For example, very common to use a full stop, for example, at the beginning of a sentence. The other possibility, other writers point out that Chinese competition can lead to new, stronger local companies being created, as has happened in the shoe industry in Ethiopia. Here we've got the word as again, meaning in the way that it has happened. So another way of introducing an example. In summary, how can you include your own voice within your analysis and evaluation? Firstly, by using non-integral referencing to interpret a source and give the reference as evidence that you're right. Secondly, by using integral referencing to interpret a source, you can either do this in a neutral, positive or negative voice. You can give your own comments in a cautious or bold tone. And you can use logical linking words and signposting to make sure that your reader can effectively follow your argument. And don't forget to avoid using I in academic writing unless your lecturer has told you to do so.